It's a curse because it's just the latest in a long chain of abuses that unfortunately almost directly mirrors the long chain of abuses our forefathers faced that compelled them to fight a revolution. And it's kind of sad that we're now almost in exactly the same posture that they were. We have some tools they did not have, and we can talk about that a little bit here in a bit. Now, it's also a blessing because it's a great wake-up call. I've been trying for 4 years to wake up my fellow gun owners, who most of them are asleep at the switch, totally asleep during the Bush years, but even during the Obama administration, still pretty much asleep, many of them, not really seeing the big picture. And it took this to wake them up. I talked to Oath Keepers from New York City. We had actually a pretty large contingent of current serving New York City cops who were Oath Keepers, which you might be surprised to know. They came up there to the rally and they said the same thing all the other guys are saying. It's like people that I talked to 2 or 3 years ago who thought I was crazy are now walking up to me and saying, I apologize to you for not listening. And now I understand what you're trying to tell us. And so that's the gift of it, is it's a good wake-up call. So I think it's a good time for us to use this to help to galvanize people to finally get them to fully defend the Bill of Rights. And it's not just about voting. And so it's critical, it's going to be critical, as we see right now with the sheriff standing up. We had a sheriff, current serving sheriff up there in New York. John, what was his name? What was the sheriff's name? Fulton County or Fulton County? What was his name? I'm terrible with names.
I apologize. I was working on my name.
Right. New York City or New York State Sheriff got up there and talked and said, "Look, in my county," he said, "I'm standing up." He just got his county commissioners, I think it was Fulton County, New York, to pass a resolution against the SAFE Act, the so-called SAFE Act. And so he's standing up. And the next thing he wants to do is make sure that the gun owners and the veterans in his community are going to back him up. So he wants to start a sheriff's posse. So that's what has to happen. All of us have a responsibility. The current serving police officers and sheriffs, of course, have a direct responsibility as current serving, as does the military, to stand down and refuse to do these things to us. That's the great safety check. It's one of the things the founders did not have, is they didn't really have strong states that can stand up. They, of course, couldn't vote the bums out because the bums were across the ocean. But in our current system, the way it's kind of rigged for incumbency and stacked against you, and when you got oath breakers in both parties, it's also very difficult to purge them out. So we kind of do find ourselves in a perilous situation of having to rely on local resistance and your local government standing up. And it is happening, even there in New York. So, but what are us veterans? What's the responsibility of a veteran? What's the responsibility of an average gun owner? You can't just sit and say, hey, you current serving police and military, don't violate my rights while I watch Dancing with the Stars or whatever, Honey Boo Boo or something. We've got duties and responsibilities too. And our duties and responsibilities should be, first of all, stop voting for oath breakers. In New York, you had 11 Republicans in the Senate who sided with the Democrats and voted for that nonsense. What was the one guy's name? Skelos, Republican leader of the Senate majority. It wouldn't have gotten through if it had stood firm. They had, the Democrats might still have outvoted by, what, 2 votes? But hey, if every single Republican's against it, you might have gotten 2 or 3 Democrats who would have crossed over and stood firm. So, if you're a Republican, you need to purge out the oath breakers in your own party. Clean out your own house. Take care of it. Why would you tolerate this kind of oath breaking and, frankly, treason against the Constitution within your own ranks? Stop doing it. Purge them out. You have to. Otherwise, you'll never have a political recourse to stop this nonsense. You'll have to rely on nullification as the last peaceful option. Now, a word on that. Some folks think nullification is somehow only about the southern states and the Civil War. It's not about that at all. Long before that, 1798, you had the Alien Sedition Acts, which were a gross violation of the First Amendment. The newspaper editors were being arrested just for criticizing President Adams. And the resistance to it in the states was led by Jefferson and James Madison. Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. both said the states have a duty. Long before any federal court ever speaks up, the states have a duty of independent responsibility to judge the lawfulness or unlawfulness of the act of Congress. If it's contrary to the Constitution and not pursuant to the Constitution, it is not the supreme law of the land. Only those laws that are pursuant to the Constitution are the supreme law of the land. And they said, hey, and they don't just say, oh, you know, we're going to go to the Supreme Court and ask the court to find it unconstitutional, but until then we're going to enforce it. No, it's not the duty of the states. It's not the duty of the sheriff to just enforce it until some court says no. They have a responsibility to say no right now. And that's what Madison said. The guy is regarded as the father of the Constitution. He knew what he was talking about. So Jefferson said also. And they said, look, the state legislature, you have a duty to declare it null and void from inception and to interpose and protect your citizens against it. And that is the middle road. What is your recourse otherwise? If your state legislature and all the state officers simply sit on their hands and say, sorry guys, I have to enforce it until some court tells me no, what's going to happen? In the current situation right now in New York, for example, or in California, if they push that nonsense through. In California, there'll be an absolute ban and confiscation of every semi-automatic rifle in the whole state, if they get what they want. And they very well might get what they want, because the Democrats control the whole legislature and the governor there. They might be dumb enough to do it. And if you don't have sheriffs standing up, you don't have police chiefs and rank and file officers saying no and nullifying it, and using civil disobedience, what would you have then? What would be the last recourse of the gun owners of California? If you set aside the safety valve and the check, the breathing room of the police refusing to enforce it, all that's left for them is either submission or resistance. You can't leave the people in that position. And that's why our Constitution does not leave you with only the choice of submission to unlawful action contrary to the Constitution, contrary to the delegated powers by the will of the people. You're not left with only the choice of submitting to that in slavery or fighting another revolution. There's that middle ground of nullification. That's why it's there. That's why the oath is there. That's why it's there. Otherwise it would be, I swear to uphold and support and defend whatever law Congress passes. Or I swear to do whatever I'm told until the court says no. It's not the oath. I swear I will defend the Constitution. How? First and foremost, by refusing unlawful orders. What did we tell the Nazis at Nuremberg when they said, hey, I was just following orders? That was their defense for doing all that they had done to people. We said, that's no defense. You had a responsibility to say no. That's what we told them before we strung them up for war crimes. What did we say to Lieutenant Calley in the My Lai massacre during Vietnam? When they fired on women and children, he said, I was just following orders. No defense. He had an individual responsibility on the spot to say no. He didn't have the luxury of waiting for some military tribunal down the road to determine that the order was unlawful. He wasn't sheltered and protected because some court hadn't said it's wrong. He had a responsibility on the spot when he got the order to judge the lawfulness of it. Every military officer does. Every enlisted man does. How many guys serve in the military? You know that, right? You had a responsibility. Yes, you were on the hook. If you refused to comply with a lawful order, you could go to friggin' Leavenworth, or if it's wartime, you could be shot. But you also were on the hook the other way. If you obeyed an unlawful order, you could go to Leavenworth, or you could be shot. It sucks either way. Do your duty. There's a presumption under military law that an order is lawful, which keeps guys from just saying, I don't feel like doing PT today, Sarge, you know. But there's a presumption that it's lawful, so you are not going to disobey that order unless you're pretty dang sure it's not. But you have the duty to do so. Chris knows this too. This is the duty that flows to the military officer.